Understanding AMD Processor Names Introduction. As you probably know if you read my blog or follow me on Twitter, I am a pretty big fan of AMD processors. AMD has modern, competitive processors in every single market segment. Unfortunately, understanding AMD processor names is more difficult than it should be. This post is meant to reduce this confusion. Updated August 31, 2022. The History of Zen. AMD announced their Zen microarchitecture on August 17, 2016. The first actual Zen-based processors were released in March of 2017. So far, there have been 4 generations of the Zen microarchitecture. The 4th generation, Zen 3, was released on November 5, 2020. Right now, it looks like the 5th generation, Zen 4, will be released on September 27, 2022. Unfortunately, AMD started this confusion with the names of the successive Zen generations. The actual names are Zen, Zen Plus, Zen 2 and Zen 3. They could have used Zen 1, Zen 2, Zen 3, and Zen 4. Another choice would have been Zen, Zen 2, Zen 3, and Zen 4. This reminds me of when Microsoft had their ill-fated penchant for using R2 in their product names, such as SQL Server 2008 R2. That decision caused an untold amount of needless confusion over the years. AMD probably used Zen Plus because 12 nm Zen Plus was a relatively minor update to the original 14 nm Zen microarchitecture. This was similar to a tick in the old Intel tick-tock release cycle. Here are the generations, their names and when they were first released. First generation. 14 nm Zen released in March of 2017. Second generation, 12 nm Zen Plus released in April of 2018. Third generation, 7 nm Zen 2 released in July of 2019. Fourth generation, 7 nm Zen 3 released in November 2020. Fifth generation, 5 nm Zen 4 due to be released in September 2022. AMD Mainstream Desktop CPUs. For AMD Mainstream Desktop CPUs, the SKU naming goes like this. First generation Zen, Ryzen 1000 series, Summit Ridge, example, Ryzen 7 1800X. This generation will not be supported on Windows 11. Second generation Zen Plus, Ryzen 2000 series, Pinnacle Ridge, example, Ryzen 7 2700X. Third generation Zen 2, Ryzen 3000 series, Matisse, example, Ryzen 7 3700X. Fourth generation Zen 3, Ryzen 5000 series, Vermeer, example, Ryzen 9590X. Fourth generation Zen 3, Ryzen 5000 series, Vermeer, with 3 DV cache. Example, Ryzen 7 5800X. 3D. Fifth generation Zen 4, Ryzen 7000 series, Raphael, example, Ryzen 9 7950X. The first 4 SKUs in the AMD Ryzen 7000 series will be available on September 27, 2022. Here is a list of 4th generation, Zen 3 mainstream desktop processors. Here are my Amazon affiliate links for 4th generation, Zen 3 mainstream desktop processors. AMD Ryzen 95950X on Amazon. AMD Ryzen 95900X on Amazon. AMD Ryzen 75800X 3D on Amazon. AMD Ryzen 75800X on Amazon. AMD Ryzen 7570X on Amazon. AMD Ryzen 5560X on Amazon. AMD Ryzen 5600 on Amazon. Here is a list of third generation Zen 2 mainstream desktop processors. AMD high-end desktop (HEDT) CPUs. To their credit, AMD stayed pretty consistent with the naming scheme between mainstream desktop and HEDT CPUs. For AMD HEDT CPUs, the SKU naming goes like this: First generation Zen, Ryzen Threadripper 1000 series, Whitehaven, example. Ryzen Threadripper 1950X. This generation will not be supported on Windows 11 second generation Zen Plus. Ryzen Threadripper 2000 series, Colfax, example. Ryzen Threadripper 2950X third generation Zen 2. Ryzen Threadripper 3000 series, Castle Peak, example. Ryzen Threadripper 3990X 4th generation Zen 3, Ryzen Threadripper 5000 series, Chagall, example, Ryzen Threadripper Pro 5995WX. So far, AMD has not released any non-Pro Zen 3 Ryzen Threadripper processors. I don't think they will ever release any now, which is a shame. Hopefully they will not abandon non-Pro Threadrippers with Zen 4. What is an APU? Accelerated Processing Unit, APU, is AMD's marketing term for CPUs that have both a conventional CPU and a GPU on a single die. This is just a CPU with integrated graphics. AMD further confused their naming by using a different numbering scheme for their APU SKUs. These APUs use higher series numbers for their product name compared to the same generation non-APU desktop SKUs. These desktop APUs will have a G or GE suffix. The GE suffix means a lower TDP, which reduces electrical usage and cooling needs. For example, a Zen 2 desktop CPU is the Ryzen 3000 series, while a Zen 2 desktop APU is the Ryzen 4000 series. The official category name for these Ryzen APUs is AMD Ryzen Desktop Processors with Radeon Graphics. Update: on June 1, 2021. AMD announced that the Zen 3 Ryzen 7 5700G and the Ryzen 5 5600G APUs will be available for sale to the DIY market starting on August 5, 2021. This is great news with the ongoing discrete GPU shortage. Here are my Amazon affiliate links for 4th generation Zen 3 mainstream desktop APUs. AMD Ryzen 7 5700G on Amazon, AMD Ryzen 5 5600G on Amazon. For AMD mainstream desktop APUs, the SKU naming goes like this: First generation Zen, Ryzen 2000 series, Raven Ridge, example. Ryzen 5 2400G. This generation will not be supported on Windows 11 second generation Zen Plus. Ryzen 3000 series, Picasso, example. Ryzen 5 3400G third generation Zen 2, Ryzen 4000 series, Renoir, example. Ryzen 7 4700G fourth generation Zen 3, Ryzen 5000 series, Cezanne, example. Ryzen 7 5700G. What about mobile processors? To maintain the confusion, AMD also uses a staggered SKU naming convention for their mobile processors, which are actually APUs. It lines up with the desktop APU naming. These APUs will also have an H, HS, HX, or U suffix. Models with an H suffix are higher 45 WTDP SKUs that offer higher performance. Special HS SKUs are more efficient, with 35 WTDP ratings. The U SKUs are low TDP versions for better battery life and reduced cooling needs. The Ryzen 5000 series added HX SKUs that have higher performance than regular H SKUs. For AMD mainstream mobile APUs, the SKU naming goes like this: first generation Zen, Ryzen 2000 series, Raven Ridge. Example: Ryzen 7 2800H second generation Zen Plus, Ryzen 3000 series, Picasso. Example: Ryzen 7 3750H third generation Zen 2, Ryzen 4000 series, Renoir. Example: Ryzen 7 4800H third generation Zen 2, Ryzen 5000 series, Lucien. Example: Ryzen 7 5700U fourth generation Zen 3, Ryzen 5000 series, Cezanne. Example: Ryzen 7 5800H fifth generation Zen 3 Plus, Ryzen 6000 series, Rembrandt. Example: Ryzen 9 6980HX. This shows the new Ryzen 6000 series mobile SKUs that became available in Q1 of 2022. This image shows the Ryzen 5000 series mobile SKUs that became available during the first half of 2021. Unfortunately, 3 of the new Ryzen 5000 series SKUs, Lucien, are Zen 2 rather than Zen 3. This will only confuse people for no good reason. Understanding AMD Ryzen processor names. This is an older, 2017 vintage, explanation of how to decode an AMD Ryzen model numbers from AMD. Here are a few examples of newer AMD Ryzen processor names, with some explanation of each one. Ryzen 7 2700X. This is a Zen Plus, mainstream desktop processor. The X means that it has slightly higher base and boost clock speeds compared to a non-X SKU. The Ryzen 7 series is an upper mid-range product family. Ryzen 5 3600. This is a Zen 2, mainstream desktop processor. The Ryzen 5 series is a mid-range product family. Ryzen 5 3600 XT. This is a Zen 2, mainstream desktop processor. The XT at the end means that it is a Matisse Refresh SKU that has a 100 MHz higher boost clock than an X SKU. I talked more about XT SKUs here. Ryzen 9 4900H. This is a Zen 2, mobile APU. The H at the end means that it has a higher TDP. Ryzen 9 is the high-end product family. Ryzen Threadripper 1950X. This is a Zen HEDT CPU. Most Ryzen Threadripper processors have an X suffix, but a few had a WX suffix. Ryzen 5 5600. This is a Zen 3, mainstream desktop processor. The Ryzen 5 series is a mid-range product family, but this is currently the entry-level Zen 3 SKU. Are we done yet? Actually, no. AMD also has Ryzen Pro and Threadripper Pro processors that are meant for business usage. They have added security features such as AMD Memory Guard, AMD Secure Processor, and AMD Secure Boot. I am not going to discuss these here, except to note that the latest Ryzen Pro SKUs are APUs, which follow the mainstream desktop APU naming standards. An example is the Ryzen 7 Pro 4750G. They are also a mishmash of Zen 2 desktop and Zen 2 mobile. They have a monolithic architecture instead of CCXs, and they don't have PCIe 4.0 support. Update. On June 1, 2021, AMD announced the new Zen 3 Ryzen Pro 5000 series APUs. These include 365 WTDPG series desktop SKUs and 335 WTDPGE series desktop SKUs. An example SKU is the Ryzen 7 Pro 5750G. Final words: the resurgence of AMD over the past 5 years with their Zen architecture has had a huge impact on the CPU market. They have put competitive pressure on Intel in every single CPU market segment. This has forced Intel to respond with higher core counts and price reductions. This is great for the market and for customers. AMD has hurt themselves some with their inconsistent processor SKU naming. I am sure many people have older Zen plus a PUS, such as a Ryzen 7 3750H, that think it is a Zen 2 processor. There are a growing number of people who have Zen 2 a PUS, such as the Ryzen 7 4800H, who probably think it is a Zen 3 processor. There was no reason for this inconsistency. Luckily, AMD is starting to clean up this mess with Zen 3, which is using the Ryzen 5000 series for desktop CPUs and a PUS. I can figure this out, but I have to think about it for a bit to do so. This is needlessly confusing for non-hardware nerds. BTW. If you are thinking about building a new system with a Zen 3 desktop processor, you should watch this video.